Great. Well, welcome everybody to the Fraser-Jones webinar on demystifying menopause in the workplace. Whilst, sorry, let me just quickly, I think we've got everybody to go. So I'm Angela Franks, partner for Fraser-Jones. For those who don't know us, we're a global HR search and selection business, recruiting across all areas of HR. We have offices in Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be hosting this webinar today. We've got a great lineup of panelists and we've called this our Dare to Discuss series. I think there's been a lot of sort of silent wins during COVID with flexibility and allowing people to kind of manage their workload. But I think whilst mental health and a whole heap of other issues have been focused on during that time, menopause hasn't. And there's a lot of policies out there that cover things that impact women, but this is one that's just hasn't really come to the top yet. So I hope this is sort of the start of a new trend in this space. But today we hope to offer some practical advice and information on what perimenopause and menopause is and how it impacts women in this demographic, what women like myself can look forward to, and what businesses can do to support them. So, so to that end, I'm going to introduce you to our speakers today. So we have Bernadette Thomas. Bernadette was meant to be in Sydney, sat next to me, but she's got COVID, so she's now in London and it's 3 a.m. So Bernadette, thank you so much. We also have Dr. Sonia Davison, Florence Maywa and Margaret Harhoff. So Bernadette is a fellow Australian. She established the Wellbeing Games and is also founder of Rosby Consulting. Bernadette's got 20 years experience in HR in Australia and the UK, and partners with organisations and leaders to improve their organisational performance. Dr. Sonia Davison is an endocrinologist at the Jean Hales Medical Centre. She is also a senior postdoctoral research fellow at the Women's Health Research Program at Monash University, where her research focuses on women's health, which includes health issues at midlife and beyond. Florence Maywa is a HR executive at Telstra. She's worked at Telstra in a variety of HR roles, including people and culture for Telstra Health. And Margaret Harhoff, last but not least, is an accomplished HR director. She runs her own HR consulting business called Make It Happen. Margaret works with leaders to ensure that they have policies and a culture in place that supports diverse and inclusive practices. So I'm going to hand over to Bernadette. She's going to run us through the order of the day. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat and manage some of that, and we'll do Q&A at the end, which I'll keep you posted when we kick that off. Thanks, Bernadette.
Thank you and welcome everyone today. So I'll just quickly run through our agenda for the day, for the session. So Sonia will start us off with a definition of menopause and perimenopause, and then we will talk about some of the symptoms, how they manifest and the impact that they have on women in work and just generally in life. Then go through why this is a business issue and how to create a menopause strategy. And that will be with me, and then we'll move on to Margaret, who will talk us through nutrition during perimenopause and menopause, and then moving on to Florence, who will take us through Telstra's journey. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A, but as Angela said, that please do ask any questions in the chat if you would like to, and we'll hopefully answer all of them as we go through. So just before I hand over to Sonia, we just have a question that we're going to put up in a poll for you all. And we would just like to know from you, our poll number one, how many symptoms you think there are of perimenopause and menopause. So just the poll will come up in a minute onto your screen and you'll have a multiple choice, and we'll give you all a minute to answer that.
The anticipation. What number will it be, Bernadette? What number will it be?
Well, do you know what? I've just realised there's a typo on here, so apologies to everybody, but the number isn't actually even on here. Um,
We'll get the closest one, don't worry.
the closest one, but
Yeah.
the number of formally recognized symptoms. So can I see the results of that, please? Okay, so it's actually 34 formally recognized perimenopause symptoms. So apologies, that number was a bit of a typo there. So those of you who said 24, you were the closest. There are 34 formally recognized. There are loads more that are not formally recognized. But I'm going to hand over to Sonia now, and she's going to take us through what to expect and also what some of these symptoms might be. So I'll hand over.
I am now sharing my screen, so just bear with me. And are you seeing what I'm seeing or not? Excellent. So let's talk about perimenopause and menopause, and I've titled this Managing at Work, but it's also Managing with Life. So women are unique. Both men and women have a prepubertal phase. I don't know if you remember puberty, that was a bit rough, but that was when hormones started entering the building. Women and men both then have a reproductive phase, but men don't go out of that phase, whereas women have a premenopausal phase, and then their hormones start to wind down again. They're sort of sex steroid hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Then they undergo perimenopause as they're running out of eggs and a menopausal transition. And then we're quite unique in that we have a third to a half of our lives in the postmenopausal phase. So there's a big difference, firstly, between the sexes. So this is not to bamboozle you. I know it's a bit busy and a bit fuzzy, but highlight on the orange graph there, the estrogen. So this is taking you through with the period to the left of the month there, and the middle red thing is an egg developing. The egg makes the estrogen. So the estrogen's at a low at the start of the period at about 150. If you're not breastfeeding, not on the pill, not pregnant or whatever, and not menopausal, of course. The egg makes quite a lot of estrogen, and you'll see there, because you're quite good at looking at graphs, I think, as an organisation, that level peaks at about 1,500. So quite a big increase. The egg is then released, and you can see in the middle of that graph that there's a huge decrease in the estrogen. And then it just sort of winds back to normal again. You will do that from about 13 to mid to late 40s if you're a functioning girl. And the average estrogen, if you smooth that over, is about 400. Menopause is the last egg, the last period. The average level will be 20. So it's a 20th of what you were used to through reproductive life. And that's why many people, many women, get symptoms that are bothersome. And as you see there, it's a 70th of that peak level. And some women did a lot better, for example, in pregnancy when they had much higher hormone levels. So the ovaries and adrenals make precursor hormones, and the ovaries make our estrogen. But also progesterone and testosterone, and all of those hormones are very important. And women have different side effects from those hormones, whether it be their own hormones or added ones. And you can see there at the top on the right that hormones affect normal girl type things. So breast, uterus, vaginal and urinary tract. But also there's lots of effects of estrogen on other tissues, and that's why the symptoms, that's why there's 34 recognised perimenopausal symptoms, because bone, heart, blood vessels, skin, fat, bowel, liver and brain can all be affected by changes in hormones, for the good or for the better. And we don't know all of this yet, and we think a lot of it is actually central at a brain level. So what's perimenopause? As I said before, this is when we're running out of eggs, and the reproductive axis for a woman, it's a bit sad, is winding down. So it's the time from when symptoms and signs of an impending or approaching menopause happen until 12 months after that last period. So it's sort of an umbrella term. Typically happens in the mid to late 40s. It can happen for up to 11 years. So if you're scheduled to have menopause at 51 to 52, which is the median, you can start having these symptoms from 40 and even the late 30s if you're going to have an earlier menopause. So periods will change, cycle duration, cycle volume, Manageability, PMS symptoms might start to come up, and things like flushes and sweats, the typical menopausal symptoms might happen, especially towards the period. So remember from that graph, estrogen's really falling down. That's when the estrogen levels are low, and that's when these symptoms start to occur. But about 1/3 of cycles, there's still an egg. So pregnancy can be an issue even in the mid to late 40s. So we've got to think about all those things. Menopause is just the last period. Sometimes it gets lost. If you're on the pill until age 50, for example, you might stop it. No more periods. We don't know when it was. A lot of women will have a Mirena device, which is a contraceptive device that also controls very nicely bleeding, and you might not know when your last period is. So what we say is if you have got those things in place, it's when flushes and sweats start to occur in someone who's of a typical age. Natural menopause will all go through if we get to the right age. Surgical, if you have your ovaries both removed for endometriosis, for example, that will, you'll just go bang straight into menopause, and that can be quite overwhelming. The normal age of menopause is 45 to 55 years of age, but the median is pretty stuck at 50 to 52 years of age. But in 1850, we were dying. The median life expectancy for Victorian women then was 45. We just weren't getting there. Whereas now it's 84.7. So we're living a lot longer in the postmenopausal state. And it's a bit sad, menopause, we stop making eggs, and the consequences of menopause are coming next. So 20% get no symptoms. They'll just say to their colleagues and their friends and their relatives, what are you going on about? This is nothing, just get on with it. But the rest, and I don't have 34 symptoms there, but I do have a nice collection of the typical symptoms on the right. 20% of women will have a severe menopause and will really struggle. Flushes and sweats, sleep disturbance, waking up like this at 3 o'clock in the morning, for example, waking up multiple times. Some of my women drench a beach towel overnight. They sweat so much. But also anxiety and mood swings, new onset of depression around this time. You can bet your bottom dollar it's not the world, it's not COVID, it's actually menopause or perimenopause. And that's important because sometimes the treatments we use are very different if it's hormonal. But otherwise, urinary symptoms, there can be lack of libido, memory loss, lessened concentration, fatigue, and some could just get these terrible muscle aches and pains, and they just think, oh, I'm an old lady, I'm becoming arthritic. So women will have, in some degree, some of these symptoms, but 20%, as I said, do not get any symptoms. Don't know if they're lucky or unlucky. So on the left side of the slide there, the things that will bring a person to me, flushes and sweats, sleep disturbance, vaginal or urinary symptoms, mood changes and altered sexuality. But I'm also looking at the long-term consequences of just someone being in midlife, really. So heart disease, stroke and heart disease and cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis and fracture, and maybe other things like dementia, which does exponentially increase from the age of 65 and definitely after menopause. So this is just to remind you that most women die of cardiovascular disease, so 32%, and we know there's an increased incidence after menopause. So we want to just think of someone at menopause and perimenopause and also think, well, this is midlife. I've got a plan that I can make for you for the rest of your life and make sure that your heart health is maximised and your stroke risk is diminished, which is important for workplaces. You don't want someone having a heart attack. You want them to be working as long as you can when they want to work as long as they can. And this is always a bit scary. This is a projection for dementia. You can see that women are projected to have a great increase in dementia, huge public health issue, more so than men. We do live longer than men, and that might be part of it, but it is double the increase compared with men. So we don't want to all be demented when we're meant to be happily at work or doing our things that we want to do. So when we're at midlife, it's important to review your health and have a look at what the future brings. Your work group are caring for others. Usually they're caring for themselves, of course, but their parents are getting elderly. They might have dependent children. And they might want to work for a long time though too. So that's very important too. So menopause and work is an issue because temperature control can be a big issue in shared office spaces. So some women will sit there fanning away, others will say I'm too cold, and that can be very difficult. Uniforms such as police officers, theatre people, people who work in emergency and they're all gowned up, especially in COVID, they can be very oppressive. And some of my ladies, I've written letters for their work just to help them be a bit more flexible with their uniform. Shift work can be very difficult with sleep, and sleep can already be an issue. So I'm often writing letters about that as well. Access to toilets, if a woman has flooding or heavy periods because they're perimenopausal and they're in a shared toilet, that can be a disaster, and to have obviously the right facilities there. I often get my ladies to seek the support of supervisors or managers or HR, very important. And the GP or specialist can be very useful if women aren't get hurt at work. And it's just very important to listen, have the conversation, and know. So there's lots of things we can do to manage flushes and sweats, but for a workplace, a cooler environment or working from home, flexible hours, very important. Air conditioning, if you haven't provided that, that's very important too. But the women can do things, and I think an important part of this is pointing them in the direction of some excellent information. So the Australasian Menopause Society has some brilliant information, as does Jean Hales for Women's Health. So just point them towards those locations where they can get some good advice, because there's nothing worse than a woman wanting to work, struggling with sleep, struggling with mood, struggling with relationships. And many of my women won't even put themselves up for promotion or a new job or whatever. They just say, I don't have it in me. And I think that's pretty sad. And this is a normal life change, but with symptoms that women don't want, and women struggle with managing it. And the other thing down the bottom there, physical activity is important, avoiding smoking, reducing weight, and programs that can benefit health throughout the workplace would be brilliant for doing all of those things. There's lots of self-management strategies, avoiding spicy foods, alcohol, etc. This is not for you to do as a workplace situation, but to promote some healthy education about this, I think is. Relaxation. So if women are stressed out and are struggling at work, that's not useful. If they're struggling at home, that's not useful. So stress relief is a very important part of this as well. Some women may need medications, and that's an important part as my role as a doctor. There's lots of different things, and I know this wasn't meant to be about medications, but I'm telling you that there's help out there. And that's part of our websites to have some excellent information about this. Some women will be great on the pill. Some hormone therapy can be life-changing. The Mirena IUD can be very useful for periods, and that can be very life-changing for workplace environments when you might be embarrassed about having flooding if you've got terrible periods, because some periods can be very heavy in perimenopause. And also antidepressants can be very useful for those mood swings, useful for flushes, and useful for stress relief. So it's not one size fits all. It's always look at the individual, look at her history, look at what she wants to do, and then tailor a solution for her. But at the workplace, if you're doing this already, I've got much lesser role to do. I can just say, thank you for supporting this lady at work. Hormone therapy is for bothersome symptoms at perimenopause and around menopause. Do not be scared off hormone therapy. If you're worried about the breast cancer risk, you need to carefully consider that with a doctor's advice. It's important for quality of life. It protects bones and it protects against heart disease, which is good, but it's an individual preference and certainly not for everyone. There are lots of other treatments marketed for menopause. They don't really do a lot. They might take the edge off things. For example, black cohosh is a herbal treatment that can help a little bit, but there's lots of things out there that are said to work that don't work. But things like hypnotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, really do work. They're great for anxiety, they're great for stress, and they're great for sleep. So it's not one size fits all. It's important to get screened and to do all of your health checks. And the important part of the workplace is to say, if you're a midlife lady or a lady at a different age, get your health checks done. So cervical screening every 5 years now, used to be called pap test. Mammogram, if you're 50 plus, you can opt for it from 40 plus, but they won't remind you. Medical checkup, so cholesterol, checking your blood sugar, checking your blood pressure. All of those things are very important to be healthy now and to be healthy in the future. To avoid stress at all costs, and I know workplaces are stressful places at times, and that's very difficult, but part of your role is to make that less so for your women and for your male workers as well. I am thrilled that I got an opportunity to talk about this. There's some really excellent information out there. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and also point women in the direction of some good quality information, because there's some really crummy stuff out there. I am at the end of my point. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Ange.
Yeah, no, I was just going to quickly say, we've just got 2 questions, so I thought it might be really good to just quickly cover them now. Is that okay, Sonia?
I am up for it.
Great. So let me just quickly open them now. I say, oh yeah, I've got them now. I don't know where they are. Hang on. I went to the Q&A, not the chat. Right, there was one about the link between dementia. So Lottie asks, is there a causal or other link between menopause and developing dementia? I guess that's what a lot of studies are covering at the moment, are they?
So the very interesting thing is that if you have a premature menopause, and that's less than 40 years of age, if you don't have some form of hormone therapy or the pill or some form of estrogen that's replaced, there is an increased risk of cognitive decline and dementia unless you're treated, because the body was designed to have this sort of level of estrogen until 45 to 50 or so. The links with normal menopause and being 50 plus, the link is that we know that dementia starts to increase in prevalence, and it really goes up like that from 65 years of age. So if you think of being at 50 with very low estrogen and an outcome at 65, it might be the 15 years of not having that estrogen that's having a very slow effect on the brain. And those women who have family history, mum of dementia or whatever, they are terrified about dementia, and they will talk to doctors more carefully about hormone therapy and menopause.
And thank you. And then another question was about what about treatment if you have breast cancer? So that question came sort of maybe in the last 5 minutes of what you were presenting. I can't remember exactly what that related back to.
The very brilliant thing there is there's an excellent information page on both the Gene House for Women's Health website and at the Australasian Menopause Society website. There's 30 different information pages on menopause on the Australasian Menopause Society website, and 2/3 of the way down there's one called non-hormonal treatments for menopausal symptoms, and that's a lovely list of different things we can do if women have had breast cancer. Of course, we don't want to have hormone therapy after most cases of breast cancer. Good question.
Thank you. And then Lottie also asked, from what age should blood tests cholesterol be done? I think you mentioned getting those tests done. Was that 40 plus?
Yeah, I like to do them. If someone comes along to me, they've obviously got questions and I want to make sure they're healthy. So I will do them from 40 plus, because you'll be surprised. Some will have a genetic high cholesterol, and I want to know that the sugar's fine, their thyroid's fine, they're not iron deficient. It's just nice to have a tune-up.
Yeah. And one last question from Alice. If you didn't have period symptoms earlier in life, is there any correlation with having no symptoms in perimenopause?
It's a really good question. Those who've had PMS tend to have a worse perimenopause and worse menopausal symptoms. Those who are smokers have worse symptoms and have an earlier menopause. So there is a link with all of those things, yes. And if you had an easy puberty and easy start to periods, you might be just fine at the other end, but still have your health checks. You mustn't miss those. Even if you've got no symptoms, still get to your doctor, have your blood pressure, do your mammogram, do all those things, and then we're happy.
Thank you. All right, sorry, Bernadette, back to you.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to now share my screen, but you have to forgive me because I had to click off it. So hopefully you can see this now. Just before we Whoops. There we go. Hopefully you can now see this. Just before I get started, I just thought I would mention that there is actually a male version of menopause, and Sonia just touched on that briefly before. And this is called andropause. We're not necessarily going to talk about that today, but I just wanted to point it out because I don't want people to forget that we probably do have some men in the room as well. What is happening to men during this time, and it hits around 30, from 30 to mid 40s, levels of testosterone start to drop. And how that actually impacts on men is we notice that there's quite a significant decrease in their level of energy. And when we come to workplaces, there's been some studies that have been done that men tend to go one of three ways in their career. So they either continue going up on that trajectory, they plateau, or they might change their career entirely. And with that comes this sense of loss of identity for a lot of men. And so what we've found is that there's links there with mental health issues, and we do see an increase in mental health issues around this age for men. So we're not necessarily going to talk about that today. I personally think there's so much more research that needs to be done in this field, not just andropause, but also menopause. But we'll focus today on our session on women mostly. I just wanted to point it out, it just happens differently for men. So now we're going to start talking about how menopause is a business issue and why businesses need to take this seriously. So I wanted to put some things into context in terms of in Australia. So there are 6.3 million women in the Australian workforce, and this is roughly about 50% of the workforce is made up of women. In 2020, 36% of 65-year-old women were still employed. Now this has been going up. So this is 3 times higher than in the year 2000 and 5 times higher than in 1980. So we can see that trend going up. Then in 2020, 30% of Australian boards and governing bodies did not have a female director, but only less than 0.5% had no male directors. So this is something that we need to be really mindful of. And then as of last year, 33% of all directors in the ASX 200 are women. So this has been increasing, which is amazing. So this is something that's really, really good. And I just want you to think about some of these figures as I go into more statistics. And I'm sorry, I am not necessarily all about statistics, but I just think it's really important for us to just think about this. In the UK, so I'm based in the UK, and a lot of research has been done in the UK, not so much in Australia around this. And hence some of our conversation is really very much to raise this awareness. So there were 2 surveys that I'm going to be referring to here. One was done in 2019, and that was conducted by Bupa and the CIPD, which is the UK's HR body. And then there was also some research last year from the UK government's Women and Equalities Committee. So in the UK, there are 9 million women aged between 40 and 60 who could be experiencing some of these symptoms of perimenopause and menopause that Sonia spoke about. 3.5 million of them are over 50 and in the workplace. So this is that demographic. They're generally at the top of their career. They're offering a wealth of experience and skills, and it is actually the fastest growing demographic in the workplace. Almost 1 million women in the UK left their jobs because of menopause, because of menopausal symptoms. 3 out of every 5 women are negatively affected at work as a result of perimenopause and menopause. So that's huge numbers of people. 99% of the women that were asked in the UK government's research said that they had at least one symptom of menopause. And for most people, sleep and their ability to focus were the 2 main issues that they responded with. So if you think about what's happening to women, if there's a lack of sleep, a lack of ability to focus, and they're coming into work every day, that's going to have a massive impact on your business, but also on their performance. And also then how they're feeling about themselves. So most respondents said that they were not able to concentrate. They had an increase in stress and a lack of confidence because of those 2 main issues. 1/3 of women took time off because of their symptoms. So again, this is huge numbers of women taking the time off because they feel like they can't focus at work or they can't perform at work. And the UK has nearly 4 million women employed between the ages of 45 and 55. And this is the largest proportion of the current workforce in the UK. 25% of women consider giving up work as a result of menopause symptoms. And a third of respondents were forced to take sick leave. So just if you think about these numbers, just purely even from a business perspective, if you look at these numbers and adjusted them for your own organisation, because I think it's fair to say that we can see a lot of trends similar with the UK and Australia, that financial cost is absolutely massive, let alone all of the engagement costs and the other peripheral costs that might be involved and issues that come up as a result of this. So your risk of doing nothing is hugely significant. And we really believe that it's in your interest to do something about educating your workforce around menopause, but also your not just individuals going through it, but managers, HR, everybody. And imagine if you had more support for those women and if they knew where to go for help, even in the workplace, but also outside of the workplace, these numbers would significantly decrease. So we're just going to have another poll, our second poll, before we move on. And I'd love to know from each of you what your company currently has in place to support women during menopause. So our next poll is going to go up. Thank you, Mel. Hopefully you can all see that now. And if you can select one of the answers. So what does your company currently have in place to support women during menopause?
Bernadette, just while people are looking at the poll, somebody just quickly asked on your slide of statistics showing there, it says menopausal age group largest proportion out of female cohort. Does that question, menopausal age group largest proportion out of the female cohort question? Sorry, I'm not sure.
Oh, it's not just female, it's the largest proportion of the workforce.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we will stop the poll there. If we could have the responses, please. Right, so 43% are doing nothing. 33% don't know what their organisation are doing. And this is really common, by the way. There's absolutely no judgment here. It was purely more around what do you know of that's going on. 2% are designing something. That's awesome. Well done. And then I'm loving this, just looking at what you currently have in other areas. So flexible working spaces and flexible working, 25%, that's really good. And 4% have a menopause policy. That's excellent. So really, really good. And then 3% are offering some training. So thank you very much. That's really, really helpful. I think one of the things as we go through is, again, this is not about anybody judging. It's more around saying, what are some of the things that we could be doing? So this is information from last year's government-funded survey or research that's been done by the UK Women's Inequalities Committee. And so these are some of the adjustments that people were asking for, so flexible working, temperature control, etc. Of the women that were asked, only 11% actually requested adjustments. And the main reason given for not requesting, when people asked why they didn't request anything, was because they were worried about the reaction from people in the company. But then 20% didn't even know who to speak to about it. So that's quite staggering to think that people don't even know where to go for help. And I think in terms of our HR responsibilities, there's quite a lot of people who could come to you and could ask for help if they knew that you were able to support that. So this is just something to raise awareness within your own organisations. I think another interesting statistic from this research was that only a third of people told anyone at work. And of those third of people, 29% told a manager, 32% told a colleague, over telling HR. So this is just something for us as HR professionals to be really mindful of. If we're not able to support, who are they going to and what's that support they're being given? So just here are some of the ideas around some of the adjustments that you can be making. But they are just some ideas. When we think about what you could be doing as an organisation to address menopause in the workplace, we really think you should be starting at more of a strategic level. And Sonia mentioned before also, menopause is so individual for everybody. Some of the things that you might be thinking of might not be a one size fits all. So I'm just going to talk you through what a menopause strategy could look like when you start thinking about some of the things that you might be wanting to do. And we would suggest really starting with this purpose. What are we actually doing? Why are we doing this? What's the point? And what are some of the things we're trying to solve for within our organization? And in order to find this information, it might be worth talking to people, having some surveys, putting some sessions together, and then thinking about what are the desired outcomes that we're trying to get to. So these are just some hypotheses here and assumptions that we make through some of the organizations that I've been working with. So these are some of the things you really want to see, and as a result of having a menopause strategy in place. And then we think about what are some of the things you might be able to do, and that's what's over the top here. So you might be able to put some training and education together, which I think is hugely important, but not just for individuals, but for your teams, your managers, and for the organization. You might have some workshops, and so they're more interactive sessions about, having some real action that comes out as a result. You might create some forums, thinking about some of the structural things that you might need to do, so policy processes, any sort of adjustments that you might need. Creating some menopause networks, and this might work really well in large organizations where you have multiple sites, and so people can get together and have those networks. Or you might have people who have already gone through menopause who can really mentor other people who are coming through the stage at that time. And then coaching as well. And, we talked about some of those symptoms around sleep and lack of focus. And this is something that is really helpful for women. I coach loads of women. I'm sure there's lots of people on here who are coaches as well, who just feel like they're not good enough for their job anymore. They're just not sure about what they're doing. They've lost all their energy. Coaching is hugely valuable for women going through this stage of their life. And you can really retain some of your employees just purely by thinking about what you can do for each of them. There are so many more things that we could talk about today in regards to creating and supporting a strategy, but I hope this has provided some stimulus for you to go away and really start thinking about changing that conversation, raising the awareness in your workplace, and support more women to remain at work during this time of their lives. So I'm now going to hand over to Margaret to take us through nutrition and menopause. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette. And I haven't got any slides, so I will be, it's just me and the screen. So hi to everybody. And I guess I will start off by saying that the subject of nutrition can very often be really controversial. We all eat, we all have views, we all have opinions. And I think it comes back to Sonia's point earlier, that it really does come down to us listening to our individual bodies and then working with somebody to try and figure out what's right for us. So I will say, and nutrition can also be emotive. When you say to somebody, maybe cut back on caffeine, and that's your fix for the day, that can trigger emotions. So what I'm going to provide is just some high level insights that we know as somebody goes through perimenopause and menopause that can be useful. So Sonia spoke about it earlier as well. It really is not just the fact that you're looking after your hormones, but it is your whole health that becomes really important. And as you move into the perimenopause and menopause phase, one of the biggest things is we see the production of our sex hormones move from our ovaries to our adrenals. And when we live in a world where already we are sleep deprived and we have our busyness and we have our stress, our adrenals are already pretty taxed. So a big focus is when it comes to nutrition, how are you nourishing your body, not just thinking about those symptoms that you may be having, but also your broader sort of organ function, body function, so that you can be as optimal as possible. So that does play to, your adrenal health, your cardiovascular health, your brain health. And so it is finding what nourishes you and finding what serves you. And so a big thing is also understanding that what is it that no longer serves you? And we know that there are certain foods, and they are gluten, dairy, and other foods that can be triggers for people. And just something as simple as maybe doing 2 cycles of your period and removing those from your diet and seeing the impact that that may have. And does that feel better? Does that support you? Really important. And I think really at the moment, with so many of us having been locked down during COVID, is our vitamin D levels. You know, it's a Western disease at the moment with the deficiencies, but really the importance that plays in our bone health and the ongoing diseases that we may see in later life become really important. So for me, nutrition and lifestyle comes down to making some really conscious and informed decisions. And what we used to do in our 20s and 30s may no longer serve us in those later years. So it is being really conscious of that. And again, Sonia spoke about the other forms of lifestyle that we need to do, and a big one is reducing stress. It really, really is, and that speaks to looking after your adrenals. But you know, that stress then perpetuates those flushes, and then you have that spicy food on top of it, and then you're topping up with a coffee, and there wasn't any sleep the night before, and you can see the culmination of lifestyle and diet that start having these impacts for you that may be managed through diet and lifestyle changes. There, of course, are, as Sonia said, there are conventional medicines, there are bioidentic hormones, and there are other avenues of complementary routes that you can take to address this. And I'm not promoting any of those, but it really is working with a trusted healthcare professional and understanding your body and what's going on for you. And one of the things I often say when it comes to looking at what is working for you, take time to write that diary. What are the symptoms you're experiencing? How are they impacting you in the workplace or in life generally? Because the minute you start being conscious of those and addressing those, you can then start making some informed choices. What do those solutions look like? And food does come into that. So some of the big nutrient deficiencies that we do see around this time are magnesium, iron, zinc. I've already said the vitamin D. We see calcium, already important for our bone health, our heart health, our brain health. And I'm not saying go to a supplement or just do food. I'm saying go and get your bloods tested, your overall health, as Sonia said again. Sorry, I keep coming back to Sonia. She just set this up so perfectly. But you know, go and get your overall health, that MOT. I know we don't call it that in Australia, but you know, just go and get that overall health check, and then understand where those levels are. And some of that supplementation will become from natural food. Some of it might come from something else. And it's amazing the impact that when that balance of diet happens, some of those, that achy joint, that achy knee, that as you go up and down the stairs, you think you're just that old woman. Guess what? The right level of magnesium or getting those in balance, suddenly that is not there anymore. Sure, you might be having some of the other symptoms, but you get to bring balance to that. So when it comes to nutrition in the workplace, I think organizations have a responsibility when there are corporate events, thinking about what the food is that you're catering for. And for me, I mean, it's not just about perimenopause and menopause, but it's eating regularly and it's eating good, wholesome food that is not as processed and so is as nourishing and as whole to its natural form as possible. Eat fresh, eat home cooked where you can. And this is me coming back to organizations. When you cater for events, maybe those sandwiches are not the way to go. Maybe it is having more fresh produce that can then support people who are trying to make those healthier choices. For you as an individual, take packed lunches, take food that you know supports you, that you don't have your 3 o'clock slump, that you know makes you feel good. As an organization, make sure you've got refrigerators and you can then allow people to bring their own food. We've spoken about the water. Make sure you are staying hydrated, but make sure as an organization there is sufficient cool water around. Caffeine is a big one. I know it's always a trigger for people, but if you're experiencing those flushes, spicy food, caffeine, they aren't your friend. But my sort of challenge to you is maybe just for 2 cycles, as I said, cut it out, reduce it, see how you feel. and then see, maybe you introduce it, maybe it's less so. So it's making some informed choices, and sometimes they're trade-offs, but it's really important during this stage that we're replenishing the nutrient levels of our body to support our endocrine system, to support us as we age. And part of that process is menopause. I could talk for ages about the various, panic attacks, hot flushes, your loss of libido. What are the things you should be doing? But that's a whole different piece. And this is really just to bring awareness to the fact that nutrition is just so vitally, vitally important. And it does play a role. And so I'm going to leave it at that. There are heaps of, I was going to say, in the UK, there are a number of people that write, and a number of books that I've read, but be an advocate for yourself. Find out what's going on for you. What do you need? And then you can speak to others. But in the meantime, you can actually take control over what's going into that diet. Are you exercising more? Are you getting those right levels of sleep? And being an advocate for yourself. Thank you, Bernadette.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I'm hopefully lots of people have taken some great tips from there. So thank you so much for your insight. We're now going to move on to Florence. And Florence, we have a question for you that we would just love for you to share with us. So what are large companies like Telstra already doing to support a menopause strategy?
Sure, thanks, Bernadette. So I think I'd start off by saying we are not one of those companies that has a specific menopause leave or period leave. I think how we try to approach this is looking at it as a holistic piece around our employees' mental health and well-being. And so for us, what that has meant is several prongs. And Sonia, a few of the things that you had in your slides, and I think will definitely come through in this. So firstly, there is an aspect of us trying to empower our people to make the decisions that fit for them. I think we've heard a lot in this conversation about the fact that there is no one size fits all, and we're trying to enable people to make individualized decisions about what they need to do for their specific situation. So for us, it's not about rigid policies about, when you come to work and when you don't. It's really about trying to provide an overarching culture and framework that enables people to actually make the decisions for whatever life circumstance they're dealing with as an employee. So just starting from that perspective, one of the things that has been mentioned is that the fact that people tend to not want to tell people that they're going through menopause. Let's face it, we're women. We have problems even telling people what our age is. So that conversation about people going through menopause is something that some people are just not in a position to want to share with their work colleagues. And it's acknowledging that and trying to get structures in place that enable people to, if they're in that space where they don't want to share, they can still access things. And where they do want to share, that we're able to equip their managers or the people that they're talking to be able to lean into that conversation a bit more. So some of the things that we are doing at a tactical level in our organization around that entire space of well-being for our employees are really focused on the flexibility piece. And I know flexibility has been spoken to death in COVID, but we've always prided ourselves even prior to COVID in terms of how our flexibility policies have gone above and beyond. And even coming through COVID, we've actually pushed that boundary a little bit more. So what that looks for us is giving people ownership of not only when they come into the office, but how they work and where they work. And so if I delve into that a little bit more, what that looks like is empowering people to actually be flexible about the time that they want to work. So you've been up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you've had night sweats, and you know that you're going to have a rough week, and we're not going to be asking you come in 8 o'clock because we've got 8 o'clock start. So people in our organization, you'll find people tend to have the tagline where they're sending emails at all sorts of wonderful times of day and night, because we're empowering people to say, work when it suits you to work. If you want to have that lie in and start a bit later because that suits you and the fact that you've had a bad night's sleep, then that is what it is, and we enable people to do that without asking for the permission to do so. We've also pushed it further in terms of where you work. So coming out of COVID, we've been very clear that we do not have an expectation of people coming into the office. Our people can work from home when they want to, as in how they see fit. So if you want to work from home 5 days of a week, that's up to you. And we're not, again, asking you to ask for permission from your manager for that. We're saying as an organization, that is our standing point. And so if you're in a position, and I was talking to one of my colleagues who was saying that when she first went through menopause, she'd get these, massive sweats where she literally needed to change her t-shirt, halfway through the day because she was soaked. If you need to just stay at home because you still want to work, but you just know that you're probably going to need to be ducking in and out to change your shirt every time, then do that. And enabling people to actually make those decisions about how they want to work and when they want to come into the office. We've also taken it a bit further in terms of people who want to dial up and down the times of work that they have. So if you want to have compressed hours because you actually want to take, a 9-day fortnight because on the 10th day you've got yoga lessons that take the whole day and that's what you want to do, and you obviously don't want to impact your pay, then having that optionality around compressed hours, around part-time work, with massive proponents of people taking part-time and dialing that up and down as they see fit as well. Job sharing is a very big thing as well with us in terms of people who particularly want to stay on roles that may require someone to continue to work for on a specific project that needs full-time work, but want to dial back the hours that they work on it. So again, enabling the people to own and have that flexibility around how they want to do that. And then sometimes you just have people, and I think Sonia touched on this, where it's all a bit too much. And I actually just want to take some time. I needed, a year off to figure out what I'm doing with this. Enabling people to take career breaks as and when they see fit as well is another piece that we have in that too. So it's really just about empowering people with as much flexibility as possible in terms of the work that they do. I think the other thing that I just wanted to touch on was really that education piece. One of my colleagues talked about the fact that when she first started through her menopause cycle, because there just wasn't any information out there, she actually thought she was having a heart attack when she had her first sort of, palpitation session. And so I thought it was quite sad, but at the same time, I think there is an onus, and I think that's been mentioned before, around how we enable people to get the information that they need to actually lean into these conversations. So from an organizational perspective, we are very big on that whole mental health and well-being space. We have an entire team that looks after that. And so over and above just the EAP that we're mandated to provide people where they can go and have the conversations, we've got a whole bunch of online resources, which also come with education sessions that come from external providers on a slew of things, including menopause. And it's really about, again, enabling people to have the information that they need to make the decisions that they need to make for their lives, but also to help any managers and or colleagues who are working with someone who is going through this and has disclosed it, so that they're in that situation where they can lean into it as much as possible. And so some of those resources would cover everything from, working habits and, considerations that people need to take in terms of how they work, right through to exercise, nutrition, and just, medical facts. And it really is just about trying to empower people as much as possible to have those conversations, but also make the decisions that they need while we support them as an employer. And I might leave it at that, Bernadette.
Great, thank you so much, Florence. I think that's really practical advice that you've given around just utilising some of those existing policies that you've got in place, utilising some of those existing structural elements that you already have in place. So that's really, really helpful. So and sounds like a great place to work as well. So I'm going to hand over to Angela now, just to go through some of the Q&A for us.
If just bear with me, because we've got some comments coming through and a couple of questions that jump around. So I've got a couple for you, Sonia, if it's okay. I'm going to read two of them out at once. What can be taken for complete loss of libido and not having a period for 7 months and then having one? Does that mean you're back to the start of perimenopause? So a couple of technical questions there.
So libido goes down with relationship length. If you're married, if you're caring for others, with perimenopause, with menopause, if you're working, if you've got other complaints. There's a huge long list of things on a great information page about libido on the Jean Hales for Women's Health website and at the Australasian Menopause Society website. Libido goes first. And I think it's an evolutionary thing. We're not meant to procreate around menopause, so our libido dies. It's a bit sad. We're meant to be young and sexy forever. Have a look at some information and get some advice about it if it's bothering to you. If you don't care about it, doesn't matter. The next bit is, I think that person was perimenopausal, or there was something else that interrupted periods. And that might have been extreme stress, for example, that can turn periods off altogether. Athletes stop having periods, so it can be having a too low body weight for their height or doing too much exercise. There's lots of issues there. You've got to seek some advice and some help from your trusted health professional. And on the Australasian Menopause Society, I know I'm not focusing for other countries, I apologise, but there's a really lovely web page to find a doctor. So you can do that by locality. You can find someone who's interested in women's health. Get some advice, because you also, if you've got long times of not having periods and you're not sort of at perimenopausal age and there's not a reason for it, you are at risk of having low bone density, and we don't want you having osteoporosis or fracture. So again, get some help. I think you are perimenopausal though.
Thank you so much. A comment, Florence, while you were talking, thank you so much for sharing the holistic approach that matches wellbeing and mental health solutions with life stages. So yeah, just a comment there. And then one for you, Bernadette. Lisa wants to know, the UK is leading the world in this work from what she can see. Why do you think that is?
I think there are some really key individuals who have been going through menopause. So we've got a couple of people who are high profile who have just led the way, and just raising awareness around the topic. And I think that that's generally why that's been the case. There's lots of other like political issues, women in politics who have been coming through who have raised this as an issue. But I definitely think there's a couple of key famous individuals who have really led the case. Yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. Just a couple of comments. Silent scream from an anonymous saying that she just feels like she's fading into the background and has missed her opportunity after sort of trying to go for a promotion and missed out on it. So, and then somebody else said stopping the red wine helped the hot flushes for me. I think it's just yeah, we were saying before we went live on the webinar that, you know, as a woman at my age, which is just after 40, you know, I'm trying to manage young kids, and you've got the juggles, career, family, all those life struggles, and then this beautiful gift of menopause is going to slap you in the face. It's like, yeah, it's just when you think things can't get any worse. Hopefully that you've got to be the 20% with no symptoms. But I think I've just seen the time. It's 2:31 in Sydney. So Bernadette, do you want me? Are you going to do a quick summary, or do you want me to wrap it up?
I'm happy for you to wrap it up, and just given time.
Oh, thank you. So a few things came through on the chat about the slides. So I think the slides that were provided, people would love to have. So Bernadette and Sonia, if you want to email them to me, I can share them to the group later today or tomorrow. And then the session's been recorded, so I will send this out to everybody just in case you had to jump off or you couldn't join us at the start. So I'll send that around. So this really, when I first spoke to Bernadette, we thought actually this year we want to do topics. I called it Dare to Discuss, because, you know, we've talked about COVID and all these other issues that are going on in HR for some time, but I thought this year we're going to talk about things that haven't been spoken about in detail before. So I don't feel like this is the end. I feel like this is the beginning of some webinars and discussions that are going to be happening definitely within Fraser Jones. So Bernadette, I hope we can get you live in the UK with our business over there. But keep an eye on our website and LinkedIn, because we will be running more sessions on other topics throughout the year. So yeah, I'll get those recordings sent around once they're ready. They go up to London, so they might not be straight away, but maybe later this week or early next week. And again, a huge thank you to everybody for your time. Dr. Sonia, it was just amazing to actually see the statistics of what actually just happens, and you've got no control over it. So I really appreciate that insight. And Bernadette, thank you for making this happen. It was all your idea, so I really appreciate that. And Florence and Margaret, it's just great to have that HR perspective on what people can do to make life easier. And do you know what? I think the whole point of this is we just want women to stay in the workforce. We don't want to lose them. You know, a lot of people during pregnancy, and then you take your mat leave, and then you take time out of the workforce, that's bad enough, and then this as well. So I think we're trying to do everything we can to keep women, you know, engaged in the workplace and have that sense of purpose. So I think that's hugely important. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.